And thanks for inviting me along today. I'm delighted to present the ongoing research into the results of this community archaeology project, which we're on for. It's a 4-year project, and the subject is one of these proposed nuclear forts, a type of monument first identified by Stevenson way back in 1949, and probably best known in this area through Leslie Alcock's excavations at Dundurn in the 1970s. So I'll quickly just outline the kind of results of the excavation before highlighting some of the kind of key questions that we're currently addressing in the final publication that I'm drafting along with Cathy McIver and Andy Heald of AOC at the moment. So the fort itself is on this hill as you're driving up past Dunkeld. It's very noticeable, and it's a prominent wood-covered hill with a really commanding position over this strategic bend in the Tay, just really as the Tay is passing from the highlands into the lowlands, if you like. It was really lost to archaeologists really since really since it was discovered in the 1950s due to rhododendron cover, and the project was really developed in direct response to this. Local resident Dave McDougall of the Dunkeld and Burnham Historical Society contacted us, and we developed a project with him, which was then delivered with AOC Archaeology. At the time, it was pre-Perth and Kinross archaeological research agenda, but so we were basically using sort of scarf research questions. But it was also in light of other ongoing work that the Trust and others were doing into, for example, the Pitcairnmick early medieval buildings up in northeast Perthshire, and also work on other fort sites by SERF down in Strathern, and by the Trust again with AOC, for example, through the Tay Landscape Partnership Scheme at Moordun, just outside Perth. And this was another one that was suggested as being another nuclear fort, but in this instance, we showed it was actually a series of Iron Age forts all overlapping. So really, if you like, of a very different sort of makeup. So the King's Seat was surveyed in 1957 by the Commission. It was really found to consist of 3 main elements: this upper central enclosure on the highest level, a western enclosure on the middle terrace with these multiple ramparts, and this lowest eastern enclosure, which is very kind of rocky, and its interior very uneven. So they're all very all pretty different, if you like, and really our trenches explored the ramparts and interiors of each enclosure. And given that they are very different in nature, our kind of primary aims were to establish a chronology for the site. Were they all contemporary, or was this a sequence of forts like Moordun? And really to try and establish something of the function within each enclosure and the site as a whole. So I'll really begin with this central enclosure. In terms of the walls, the ramparts were pretty collapsed and pretty poor condition, but really we're looking at kind of, as you'd expect, the kind of stone, earth and probable timber construction. And on the top, the interior was really investigated in 2 areas. The first area was around this large erratic boulder. It's really quite interesting. It had these holes drilled in the top, which aren't modern and may relate to some kind of superstructure. And we excavated around that area, and it revealed various things: rock cut features, quarrying, but no incised carvings, which was kind of what we were wondering of whether there might have been something like that on that area. The second area excavated quite a big part of that eastern lower part of this enclosure, and it was about 20% of the lower side of the enclosure, and it recovered over 200 small finds and in situ structures. The first of which was really this stone platform built up against the kind of rocky higher side, west side of the enclosure. And then the second area, and then beneath this was foundations of a probable turf and timber building. And inside this building was this large hearth. And this produced a substantial amount of animal bone and distinct ash-rich layers, carbon dated to the 6th to 7th century AD. And then between there and the outer wall, you can see here, there was also this area of it was, the building was truncated by later medieval or post-medieval cultivation. But the finds from this area included earware pottery, glass, crucible fragments, stone molds, clay molds, spindle whorls, if you like, that kind of classic signature of the kind of early medieval forts a la Dundurn. On the western enclosure, we excavated the multiple ramparts and a part of the interior. And again, very similar, slightly more terraced, but on the upper enclosure, we found a large post hole for what was a kind of timber revetment at the back of the rampart. And again, this produced carbon dates of similar sorts of dates, 6th to 7th century AD. And there were really these kind of more terraced ramparts going down this quite steep slope. The interior within the western enclosure also revealed traces of turf buildings and also smaller hearths, 2 smaller hearths, but they'd all been rebuilt, which is quite interesting. So they both had been had been rebuilt, and the finds from there were basically similar to the central enclosure, but fewer in number, but included things like the crucible fragments, glass, etc. The eastern enclosure, this kind of unusually shaped, kind of rocky, with its rocky interior, we only excavated a small part of that, and it did reveal the outer rampart and an area of metalworking inside. And the rampart was really kind of an earth bank with these kind of large retaining stones on the outside, so slightly different to the other construction. And the ironworking area again produced a carbon date consistent with the others, sort of 6th to 7th century AD. So there are our dates. We've got them from each of the areas, if you like. And it's interesting in terms of kind of pre-fort activity, we had late Mesolithic activity identified through lithics, but no evidence of any subsequent activity until the kind of early medieval period. All the radiocarbon dates are statistically contemporary and suggest basically construction no earlier than the early 5th century AD, with an end to activity in the sort of mid-7th century. And as I say, these are importantly from each of the different enclosures. I'll quickly go through the finds, but basically, as I say, they were really that classic fingerprint of high status early medieval forts. Eware pottery, 12 shards from the central and west enclosures, bowls, jars, jugs, etc. And their condition suggests that they were in use in the upper enclosure and broken there, etc. Glass, including imported 6th century Anglo-Saxon, these conical beakers, as well as Anglo-Saxon beads, gaming pieces, Roman glass vessels, etc. Non-ferrous metalworking represented by various fine types, 2 types of crucible, suggesting, casting both large copper alloy objects and potentially silver items. And there's a program of XRF analysis going on at the moment to really confirm what all of these crucibles were being employed on. Quite an interesting one. We found this kind of stone crucible stand, if you like, so your crucible is nice and secure. We also found stone and clay molds, including these ingots, clay molds for ingots, and these slightly more unusual kind of mirror-shaped molds. And the suggestion may be there that they're kind of hammered out to produce a kind of ladle with a handle. And we also had over 70 fired clay fragments, which included pin and brooch molds. Other iron items were found and direct evidence of metalworking, hearth bottoms, slag residues, etc. Whetstones and this Anglo-Saxon type sort of angle-backed knife of the early medieval period. And interestingly, spindle whorls, textile production through spindle whorls in different materials, different forms. And really kind of quite a rare and potentially important find was this cache of around 300 sling stones from the top enclosure. Small river-worn rounded stones of a consistent size, taken from the river valley up at the top of the hill. And really they were found kind of overlooking the western enclosure, and defensively, multi-velation and slingshots makes a lot of sense. But I wonder whether they may also have had some kind of entertainment value in terms of, if you like, almost the kind of early medieval version of kind of medieval archery or Victorian clay pigeon shooting. So really, in summary, our evidence suggests that all these three enclosures are contemporary and represent the kind of classic nuclear form constructed de novo in the 6th century. The finds support this, and as I say, very similar to the sort of Dundurn model, with elite feasting, specialist metalworking on the summit, specialist metalworking in the western enclosure, and then ironworking in the lower enclosure, so a kind of terraced hierarchy of activities. And this may have remained our kind of overall conclusions until I was looking at available low-resolution LiDAR data and uncovered this large enclosure running around here, which, as you can see, is actually bigger than the other forts other enclosures put together. And in parts it was made up of a turf bank, and in other parts it was just using enhanced or natural cliffs. And we went and found the turf, underneath the turf bank, we've confirmed that there was a stone base to this. So we know it's there. Unfortunately, we don't have a date from it. But really, it's reasonable to suggest, on the basis of how it's configured and its relationship to the other monuments, that it's early medieval also. But you know, it's important, and it might significantly change how we interpret how the site works. It's a very big enclosure. It's nicely south-facing, etc. And these are just a few kind of reconstructions, just to give, you know, just to illustrate kind of where we're thinking. So here we have the upper citadel with its large turf building and its feasting hearth. Its western enclosure with some more metalworking in here, the lower eastern enclosure, and this large southern enclosure, which we've left a little bit empty at the moment. But you know, as I say, it could well have been most likely the home of a settlement supporting the fort. And this is kind of looking north again, you know, just showing these commanding position over the rivers, etc. And so here we have our ironworking down in here, our metalworking in here, the large building on top, etc. So the big question, I guess, about the southern enclosure was, you know, who was living there? Was it temporary? Was it permanent? Was it populated only by specialist craft workers, or was it a more general population? Was it a kind of trading post? Did it have that kind of function? Was it where people stayed while they were building the fort? So there's all sorts of questions that come from that, which we've got fairly limited evidence, but you know, there's lots of models we can speculate. So in terms of comparators, Dunkeld might offer some kind of some parallels, in that our upper enclosure was in two sides. It had an upper part and it had a lower part. You know, so you could envisage something where there's a kind of if you like, a kind of an inauguration site, or some kind of gathering of peers in a sort of dramatic location to connect people to the royal elite, to the land, and kind of you know, stamp their authority. Dundurn and St Fillan's we've mentioned already, but it's, you know, there's a lot of parallels there as well, particularly in terms of its micro-location and its configuration generally. And while Alcock suggested sort of 3 phases over 500 to 800 AD, these are still broadly within our overall area for the King's Seat. The other early medieval site, Clapchard Craig, in the area down in the estuary, there's parallels there as well in terms of landscape. It's kind of, again, controlling this pass through the pass of Lindores from the Tay estuary into Stratheadn and Fife. Consists of 3 enclosures: rocky summit enclosure, larger enclosures on descending terraces, etc. And they also had lots of hearths there. So I guess what you can begin to sort of wonder whether, you know, are these seats of local kings? Are they potentially inauguration sites where authorities established? You know, visits by royals to bond with peers, feasting, exchange, and all that kind of stuff, exchange of high status items. The locations which are controlling these key terrestrial passes might support this. But perhaps production and trade was also a primary function, because we've seen all of this specialist stuff. We've seen these imported wares coming in, glass, pottery, etc., from far afield. And but really, the question, I guess, in terms of the relationship to other monuments in the area, maybe around to the west of the Tay. There's early medieval activity at these proposed ring forts, suggested ring forts, these homesteads, some of which are Iron Age, lots of which have later early medieval activity at them. And as I say, also to the Pitcairn, survival of Pitcairn buildings. And what's kind of interesting about northeast Perthshire, east of the Tay, is large monumental structures like this, or like forts, are really noticeable by their absence. So there's kind of something different going on up there. We mentioned trade, and I think the site was clearly very well connected. Elite specialist crafts are being produced there. So we have to begin to wonder what is the nature of production and trade, and how is that being connected to sites more locally and further afield. But also, should we be looking, I guess, for other sites, the sort of Rhynie type model, if you like, in Aberdeenshire? I mean, should we be looking for lowland sites? And perhaps these forts are actually more about production, trade, rather than the kind of seats of royalty. The other big connection is, what's the relationship to the early monastic sites? And this one, of course, at Fortingall, just up the road from Dunkeld. And thanks to Gordon Noble for this is really stunning bit of geophysics. Dunkeld Cathedral here, and there's the discovery of a monastic vallum there, which Gordon's team have dated to around 700 to 900 AD. So tantalizingly, kind of just at the end of our fort going out of use, we see these early monastic sites being established at Dunkeld potentially. And really, Dunkeld it's probably the most important early monastic site in Atholl. And of course, it then becomes a very important site beyond that. And perhaps, there may well be a link here between our things. And it comes from this stone, which was found not far from the King's Seat itself. It's now in the cathedral, but it shows this kind of mounted warrior with a spear and drinking from a horn on one face. But on the other face, there's a small equal-armed cross has been incised. And it may well be that, that is a potential link between the fort and this early monastic site being established. So really, we hope to explore all of these themes more fully in our publication, which we hope to have out, next year some point. So if you're interested in that, we'd ask that you look into that. And so basically that's my talk. So thanks for your attention. I'd just like to thank our funders. I'd like to thank everyone at AOC, and of course to all our superb volunteers who made the project such a success.